all of these things are structural, and that's why we need structural change. And it won't happen if we keep fighting each other, because we are not the enemy. The enemy is time, and time is running out.
We've got this exciting, incredible, dynamic, brilliant young person, Xiye Bastida, who I'm so looking forward to having a conversation with.
She is a remarkable 20-year-old climate justice activist. She is one of the prominent organizers of the Fridays for Future youth movement and has stirred countless audiences to action at climate strikes, rallies, town halls. She has spoken at the United Nations World Urban Forum and is a recipient of the Spirit of the UN Award. Her call to humanity can be summed up in her own powerful words. Human civilization needs to make drastic changes in its value system. It needs to mature. Xiye Bastida, welcome to Undaunted.
Welcome. So good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I've got so many questions that I want to ask you. You have this incredibly rich heritage. I mean, your mother is Chilean. Your father is of the Otomi-Toltec Indigenous peoples. You were born and raised in a small town in Mexico, right? How did that shape your understanding of the importance of respecting and living in harmony with the earth?
Yeah, of course. So thank you so much for the question. I think it's important to set the tone on value system before we talk about the issue, because the issue really comes from breaking all of these relationships with each other, with Mother Earth. So I'm going to talk about 3 principles of Indigenous communities. The first one, and this is regardless of where in the world you are with Indigenous peoples, this is something that really is in all of our value systems. The first one is reciprocity. If we take, we must give back. And that is true for our interpersonal relationships. It's true for ourselves. We cannot have an extractive relationship with ourselves. And it's true with the world, with Mother Earth, our relationship with Mother Earth. We've been taking so much without nurturing, without restoring, without taking care. And that is why we are in the problem that we are. The second value is intergenerational dialogue, intergenerational cooperation, intergenerational sharing of knowledge. In Indigenous communities, there's a lot of youth and elder dialogues where we learn so much of the wisdom of our elders. And that is why it must be established that the fight for climate justice is not a fight between generations. It's not us saying, you have failed us and you ruined the world. It's us saying, we have not been on the right path, but we need you and you need us. There's an African proverb that says, the youngest run the fastest, but the elders know the path. So it's about that energy that we have as youth to get things done, the new perspective. But we cannot do it without the wisdom of the people who have been here before us and the people who have learned how to care for Mother Earth with this relationship. And that can be from my grandma or a scientist that's learning about the interconnectedness of the climate crisis and biodiversity loss, for example. And so that's the second one. And the third one, taking care of ourselves to take care of the world. And I think that was seen very clearly during the pandemic. We all realized that we were burned out, that we needed self-care, that we needed to care. Our families needed care from us as well. And if we go out there, especially activism is a very, very tiring thing to pursue, because there's always things that seem to be coming at you. Biden announced this, or like you said, the Amazon is on fire, London is on fire, Europe is on fire. There's always things happening. So you always have to be responsive and responding and creating projects and fundraising. So it can be very tiring. And we have to be able to set those boundaries, because if we're not well inside, what energy are we putting out there? It has to be about changing that of, the energy that you're putting out there is parallel to the world that you are creating. So those are the 3 things that I think are the most important. And there's many, many, many more teachings. There's another one, which is the 7-generation principle, which talks about learning from the wisdom of the past 7 generations to ensure the stability of the future 7 generations, which is something that we've lacked. All of our systems, our political, economic systems, are short-term, not long-term. So those are some of the things that guide me and obviously inform all of the decisions that I do in my activism.
Your parents are activists, which is really inspiring. I'm sure in some ways that paved, a way for you. But was there a moment when you knew you had to do something? We know that your hometown was flooded. Did that have anything to do with it? Maybe you could kind of take us back.
Yeah. So for me, my childhood was just hearing my parents talk about the climate crisis and what they were doing in the academic world, in the UN world. They met at a UN conference in 1992. So my parents go way back to, to the first Earth Summit that the UN ever organized in Rio de Janeiro. So I grew up hearing about this, and always kind of the latest on the climate crisis. And it was always, even for me in this environment, even though I knew a lot of what they were talking about, it was still very far away from me. It was still up in the Arctic. It was still 2050. What was 2050 when it's 2013, It was so detached, but nonetheless, it was important to me. So I still saw myself following a career in the environmental space once I got to college, once I chose my career, once I chose my master's. But the world doesn't work like that right now. We cannot wait 10 years till I finish college. And that's when my hometown flooded in 2015 when I was 13 years old. And everything, the notion that I had of the stability of the world just disappeared. There was no stability. It was here. It was happening. And it's not just the natural disasters, because that's the second wave of the climate crisis. The first wave is the pollution, the disproportionate amounts of pollution, primarily to low-income frontline indigenous communities. So my own community is what academics call the perfect storm, because we have highways coming through, we have waste facilities, we have contaminated river, Mexico City extracting our water from our aquifer, and then natural disasters hitting us. So it's this mix of injustice. That is what my fight is about, justice for communities. And the climate crisis is exacerbating all of the present injustices, which is why I also don't want to talk about straws and polar bears. I want to talk about people and health and the dignity that we deserve.
Wow. I love that. I love that. You moved to New York, as Nava pointed out, precipitated, by the flood that took place in your home village. I grew up in New York City, so I know that stomping ground very well. And I'm thinking about I'm curious about what you've learned in your experience of living in New York about, some of the challenges that America's grappling with around the issue of race, around the issue of gender, and how those things impact, right, the work that we're doing to combat climate change and to bring, justice to the community.
A lot of the times, when I see it so clearly, I need to communicate it so that people see it clearly as well. So obviously we know that the United States has a long history of redlining, which, for those who don't know, redlining is breaking neighborhoods and giving them grades A, B, C, D based on their racial makeup, migration status, and usually white communities, affluent communities got the best grades and Black and brown communities got the worst grades. And this impacted the bank loans that you could have, et cetera, et cetera. Nowadays, the most polluted communities are the redline communities. Nowadays, the communities with the most waste facilities, all of these kind of even recycling facilities, which recycling we have to do, but they're still polluting. They're still in these frontline communities. So the United States really is a place that has race and the crossover with environment very, very, very tight together. And it's something that is called environmental racism, structural environmental racism. And it's something that we have to be able to address. We're not just talking about lowering the amount of carbon that we put in the atmosphere. We're talking about justice for communities that have historically been impacted. And for example, even the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, usually cleans up white affluent communities faster than brown and Black communities. All of the expansion of waste facilities happens in migrant communities. And there's countless examples of this. Where do pipelines happen? Through indigenous land. We've seen that. Where are oil spills happening? Not in Lower Manhattan. The seawall that they want to build would displace water to Queens and East Harlem, and it would protect the financial district. So we see that it's structural. And because of that, we have to be able to actively talk about it and implement it into our climate solutions. The attack on women is the attack on the earth. The philosophy that we have, even on international relations, is a theory called realism that literally says, word by word, avoid emotions in decision making. If we avoid emotions in decision making, how are we going to feel if we declare a war? How are you going to feel if we fight over oil? There's no feelings included in these Eurocentric perspectives that we've had for even international relations. So that's why women are so important, not only because we've been historically attacked, especially in Latin American countries, but we know how to fight for us, fight for Mother Earth and the rights that we deserve. And we have to bring in those more feminine qualities into decision making, because people getting hurt matters.
Yeah.
People suffering matters. And the oil industry has been one of the most responsible for people getting hurt.
What I'm really feeling from what you're sharing is this whole idea of who is valued and who is not, right? And historically, certain groups of people have been valued and others have not. And because of that, right, we find ourselves in the predicament we're in because we've cut out all of this knowledge, right? All of this wisdom from all these different groups from around the world that could be aiding and collaborating to solve the challenges that we face.
It's essentially you're removing the humanity from the decision-making of the world because you're removing humanity. You're removing actual humankind. It was in the short documentary Rising Up. One of your peers said something that was pretty striking along these lines. And she said, until we pull politics out of it and put humanity back into it, we're not going to get where we need to be. Could you speak to the relationship of removing that politics and putting the humanity back into it?
Well, of course. I think that for me, especially not growing up in the US, seeing the fact that everything is so polarized, because that's the issue with the US politics right now, the polarization. Not really politics in general, because everything is politics. Our life is political. The decisions that are made affect us. And detaching ourselves from that is not smart, because obviously we have to be aware of what decisions are made at every level of government. But the polarization is what's dangerous, because in no other country is there such a high quantity of climate deniers. And it happens because of that polarization. And we've seen how social media impacts that polarization, the content that you choose to see. And it's damaging to have that division, because it is a time where we have to come together. And we have to put that humanity into it, because it's not about the war on coal. It's about people's survival and humanity's survival. When we see, the Supreme Court / the EPA's ability to regulate carbon emissions, a blow to environmentalists. It's not a blow to environmentalists. It's a blow to the planet and life on Earth. People in the climate movement are the ones who have stepped up and realized that we need to fix this issue. But in reality, everybody should have climate always in their minds in whatever job they do. And that is why I don't think it should be polarized. It should be the main thing that we're all building towards, because we have been blindsided for way too long. And part of it is the effort that the fossil fuel industry has done in shifting the blame to individuals. All of these companies have created the carbon footprint that we've all heard about. What's your carbon footprint? The oil industry created that because they don't want us to ask them what their carbon footprint is. The plastic industry is the one telling you to recycle instead of producing less plastic and switching back to glass. All of these things are structural, and that's why we need structural change. And it won't happen if we keep fighting each other, because we are not the enemy. The enemy is time, and time is running out.
And what I'm hearing is this refrain in your responses about justice, about the issue of justice. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how you see the principle, and I view justice not only as a principle in the material world, but also as a spiritual, moral principle, right? how you
Mm.
see the cause of justice or the reality of justice as framing all of your activism and everything that you do.
Yeah, so one time somebody asked me, what is justice? What is climate justice? So let's define that first. And for me, climate justice is joy. And people don't usually expect that. They expect me to give a long answer, a technical answer. But climate justice is joy because the climate crisis is violent. It is going to take things away from us. I am scared if it rains too much because right now I'm in an apartment that's at the lower level. And 3 days ago, water started coming in, and the landlord said that had never happened before. Being scared is not joy. Joy is the ability to breathe clean air and drink clean water and not worry about the next heat wave, the next sea level rise, the next thunderstorm. And once we realize that our purpose is to further joy to communities, to have them have autonomy and dignity, that is when we are going to shift away from that way of extractivism, of seeing some communities as expendable and seeing everybody as valuable in this new world that we're building. And for me, Indigenous knowledge is at the center of that, because if you think of the communities that have been living in harmony with Mother Earth, protecting all of our ecosystems, Indigenous peoples protect 85% of the world's biodiversity, and they're only 5% of the world's population. But not only that, if there were no Indigenous land defenders, we would have nothing else to protect because it would have all been extracted already. So we have to honor the fact that people have been putting their lives on the line to protect the carbon sinks, the beauty of life. And now that we are waking up to how all of this is being taken from us, we need to rethink the way in which we've been approaching the environmental movement, which has always been, that's not my thing. Environmentalists are, like doing park protections, like doing like all of these things. I know how the environmental movement is perceived because I've seen it with my own eyes when I walk into rooms that don't have climate activists. And I want to switch people's perspective on that. It is about furthering joy, and your skills are needed.
I love the way that you talked about justice being attached to joy. I think that was incredible. And I would like to talk a bit more about your involvement with Fridays for Future.
Yeah, so I love the story of how Fridays for Future started because I think it's the moment where a lot of youth really, really got involved. That was their first involvement, let's say. For me, I was already the one of the leads at my environmental club in my high school. I went to Beacon High School. Some people from New York maybe know Beacon High School. I heard, we were in the club, we were like people, the prior leads were really talking about being vegan for a day, bringing your own reusable cup. And for me, knowing the power that New York had, being not from New York and seeing it as this inspirational city where everything can happen, I really saw it as a place where if we did something big, people would know around the world. So when I became lead, I started to organize people to go to City Hall to testify in there, not just outside protesting, but in there, testifying about our experience as youth growing up in this world, going up to Albany to lobby different politicians, writing letters, organizing rallies, all of these different things. But even that, I had noticed, was not enough because there's organizations that have been mobilizing around this for decades. So what were we going to do as youth? Disrupt our civic duty of going to school to get attention, because that's what you need to do sometimes. Disrupt your civic duty. Some people, that's why they strike, to get people's attentions. And that's when Greta Thunberg called for the first ever global climate strike. I had only seen her on TV. I had never met her. And just this call to action came. And I said, okay, let's organize a school, because that was my community, my one building. So putting posters up, they were gone the next morning, hiding them in the bathroom stalls. They were again gone the next morning for a whole month, organizing, making it cool that there was going to be a climate strike. Asking people, are you going to that thing on Friday? Yeah, I'm going. Okay. So that's how you get people excited, because it becomes something that's kind of like our thing. I didn't really know how many people were going to come out. And the day of the strike, 600 kids walked out, which is half of my school. And the freshmen were not allowed to walk out. So really, it was a lot of people.
So, I mean, how did you feel in that moment? I mean, you got 600 kids to respond. So what did that feel like for you in that moment?
Well, it felt like anything was possible. It felt like even if not everybody was talking about it, everybody cared. I knew it was important because I was the only one going to every advisory and every classroom announcing the strike. But at the end of the day, when you put out a call, people respond, especially when it's an important thing. So it was 5,000 of us citywide, which is not little, but it's also not a lot. And we decided, the different organizers from the different high schools, to come together. And that's when Fridays for Future NYC started. We organized, we got together every single week. By September 20th, we organized a 300,000 person climate strike.
Wow.
In the city.
Wow.
From 5,000 to 300,000.
Wow. Wow.
You know, it's really inspiring, because I think a lot of the reason, I know a lot of people, they have that, you mentioned for a while you're kind of detached, and it was such an overwhelming and very big issue. And I think a lot of people don't realize that it's possible to go from organizing on a local grassroots level and then working at it consistently in an organized way to achieve that type of response. And I think a lot of people stay away from even trying sometimes, because they're like, well, how are we going to get, the response we need? Was there ever a point where you actually said to yourself, I don't know if this is even going to work?
Well, it's, I think, the question that my parents have been asking their whole lives, but that doesn't mean they stop. And the reason why you don't stop is because you're honoring the resilience of your ancestors. My dad has said we are survivors of colonization, and we have to honor that heritage, and we have to stand up for future generations, because we don't inherit the land from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. We are borrowing children's futures. And people also ask me, why do you strike? Like, obviously, I know they haven't read any history book, because any change that has ever happened in the world has happened only through mass mobilization. But I answer, it's because only by calling on massive amounts of attention from the media, who control the narrative, from government who controls policy, from companies that control the economy, only then are they going to invite us into these spaces. So I was the youth speaker, the only civil society speaker at the Biden summit. I've spoken at COP25, COP26, which are the annual UN meetings on climate change. And we, as youth, have infiltrated these spaces like never before. Now there's companies having youth advisory boards where they're letting themselves be challenged by youth. More than ever, corporations are shifting towards being B corporations, which is a certification where they have to be socially responsible to people and the planet. Things are changing. Things are happening. There's laws that any new building in New York City has to have either a rooftop garden or solar panels. We are not getting stuck. That is a false narrative, but the climate impacts are getting worse. So we are going to be seeing a lot of news on more heat waves, more wildfires, coral bleaching, sea level rise. And it doesn't mean that there's no solutions for this. It just means we have to work faster, because we already have the tools. The financing is coming in. We don't know how to manage money. I'm not asking you to give me money. I'm asking you to give money to the organizations that already have solutions that need to scale up, and to government, and to put pressure on governments and ask every single candidate to be a climate justice candidate.
One of the things that you talked about, that you have gone back to a few times in your writings, that I find to be very interesting, is the importance of, in the work that you're doing, is to make sure that everybody's seen, right? That the diversity of voices that you're working with, no matter their background, what kind of economic social strata they come from, what part of the world they come from, what the color of their skin is, but they are seen as the unique individual they are, and they bring that to the work. And I'm wondering what those, when you're in these spaces, you're doing this work, your boots on the ground. What are those discussions like? Are they internal discussions you're having with yourself, where it's like, okay, I want to make sure that, I'm being conscious and intentional about seeing everyone and making sure everybody feels like they have a place at the table? Are there conversations you're having in group settings where you all are talking amongst yourselves, making sure that there is a collective buy-in of everybody that you can gather around that table to make those decisions? So what are those discussions like for you when you're making those decisions?
Well, this is a dual problem, because I think internally the movement has grown a lot. We obviously know it started in Europe, and the biggest climate strikes happen in Germany, in Italy, in London. And most of it, and Australia also, most of it is because the rights of people to protest are protected. You cannot strike in India, you cannot strike in Singapore, you cannot, being an environmental defender in countries like Colombia and Mexico is very dangerous. So there's a privilege in being able to raise your voice, which is also why there's a lot of big mobilizations in the global north. But that doesn't mean that there aren't youth mobilizing in the global south. That doesn't mean that we don't need to be part of these UN conferences and UN dialogues. My friend Aisha Siddiqa, she's Pakistani American, she always has said very clearly, if the United Nations had really included all people and all stories in resolutions, we would not be where we are today. Because the leading voices at even the UN level, which is supposed to be a place for all peoples, is still led by this Eurocentric narrative and Eurocentric agenda, which is extractive to the global south. And so we have to challenge that. And us as youth have been doing a lot of progress on that. So Fridays for Future actually has a branch called Fridays for Future MAPA, which is most affected peoples and areas. So all of the people in Fridays for Future MAPA are youth of color from different communities across the global south who are, for the first time, getting opportunities to speak at the UN level, to share the stories, to share their narrative. But that's just one half of the story. The other half is the media. And the media has a huge, huge role. For example, one time we were, all of us gathered together, and somebody asked, who here has been called the Greta Thunberg of their country? And everybody raised their hand. Even this girl from Sweden was called the Greta Thunberg from Sweden, even though Greta Thunberg is Swedish. And that's just like the amount of times I've been called the Greta Thunberg of the US is just way too many. And I know they don't even like read their own story that they wrote, because I'm not even from the US, I'm Mexican. So that's how the media is controlling that narrative of the one person who is supposed to be the marker for activism. And we have to call that out. So a lot of us have said time and time again, I wrote an op-ed about it, saying diverse voices matter because we don't all share the same experience. And it is important for our stories to be told. For example, and Greta knows this, and she is very intentional about giving space to youth from other countries. And one time, like, she used to be always at the front of the strikes. And in Glasgow, she was at the center, at the back, letting Indigenous people lead. And the media still said Greta Thunberg at the heart of climate strike. Before, they used to say leading climate strike. So it's the way that it's framed. And we need to be able to go past that and see the individuality in people, to see why we come into these spaces, so that more people get inspired, because not all of the stories are the same. And I know that when I see people who look like me in media, I get inspired by them. And that cannot happen if we have one face in the climate movement.
Every person that is working towards some form of justice, whether it's even in their homes, it's in their communities on a national scale, have a painful point, something that hurts them or pains them in the process of their activism. You mentioned one time that it's a little painful to hear or hard to hear when someone says, you're the leaders, you're going to change the world, we need more people like you, and they don't step up to be those people themselves. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and this is something that I've said more and more in adult spaces, because it is very hard for us to listen time and time again. Oh, we're good because we have you. You are the hope. You are the future. You are going to change the world. Because even though we want all of these things to be true, we are not in those positions of power. So we need people in those positions of power, of influence, to step up, and it cannot just be placed on us. Because let's say there's a CEO of a company and he sees youth on the streets and he's like, great, they're gonna be the ones leading change. I have to step out and just support them from afar. But how about that CEO changes everything in their company and changes the industry and sets new standards for industry leaders? That's what we need. I don't want people to ask me how can they support me. I want people to ask themselves, what does it look like for me to be a climate activist?
I love that. It reminds me of the dialogue that's going on right now about the issue of race here in America, where you'll have, these dialogues between African American community and our white brothers and sisters, and sometimes the question will be, well, what would you like me to do? And my thing is like, you have to buy in. You have to be engaged. You have to realize that your destiny is tied up in my destiny. So we have a shared destiny. And in order for us to solve this issue, we both have to buy into the process.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. It's really calling people into a level. Well, you said it so beautifully in your writing, and you're a heck of a writer, by the way. I love your writing. It's so well done. But you said in your writing. You talked about maturity, right? It's a new level of maturity. It's calling us into our maturity, to take responsibility, to be the agents or the lead protagonists in our own transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that, the fact that you're calling us into that. Really do. And Nava knows something about that because Nava's been a youth activist, so she knows a lot about this. She's been in this for a long time.
When you are youth, there is like, and I can even remember, pinpoint the time when all of a sudden I woke up and I was like, urgent. I need to to dedicate my entire life to moving in this direction and working in this space. And it's, you live and breathe it,
Mm-hmm.
and you feel that there is a necessity. But then as time goes, that urgency often becomes depleted. And I think that's why we need, as you mentioned so beautifully, the wisdom of the elders that know the path. But it is that physical vigor and that urgency that youth are by destiny tapped into because of survival of civilization. Young people have to have that sense of urgency because they have to move things forward so that the next generations can survive. But, like Masud spoke, you talked about maturation. You said in your essay, in our struggle for the unification process, so necessary for humanity to mature as a whole, all of us need to be conscious about our power of agency to bring about the future that we want to see. This resonated a lot with Masud and I. Both Masud and I are Baha'is, and there's the Baha'i idea that humanity is transitioning from a stage of, you could say, spiritual infancy to this spiritual maturation. And the idea that just as a human being and society as a whole moves from one development stage to the next, it's really dependent upon the spiritual and active work and decisions of people to go from that place as a collective, to go from that place of infancy to maturation. How does this concept resonate with you? And how did you come to your own conception of this maturation process in humanity?
Well, everything you just said resonates a lot with me. And I think is something that we also lack a lot in movements, the spirituality of it. And it's so heavily present in Indigenous circles. It's all about ceremony and prayer that it's like, even now I feel comfortable sharing more because I know that you are versed in it. So it's not just about the technical. My dad says basically the same thing that you said. He taught me that humanity right now is in a level of consciousness that is medium low. That's what he calls it. Like not even,
I love that. Medium.
like not even medium,
Medium low.
like medium low.
Yeah, medium
And-
low.
You can't even boil an egg on medium low.
Yeah. It's lukewarm.
It's very lukewarm. Oh man, we got to turn up the heat.
And our purpose is really to bring that level of consciousness, to like increase that level of consciousness, and that can only happen when we deepen our understanding of how things interconnect with each other. And it's just so beautiful for me to know that I know my purpose, and I want to share that with people, because that is the purpose of humanity as a whole, to increase our consciousness, to mature as a whole, and to be able to live in a more stable environment. And Earth is a planet of transition. That is what Mother Earth is, a place where we have choices, and we have to make the right choices in order for that maturation. And there's a lot of theory around this on the more philosophical, theoretical side, which says that only 3% of a population needs to be engaged for consciousness to rise or change to happen. And that's why I'm not very interested in convincing everybody in the world that the climate crisis is here, but those who have their hearts and minds open to learn more about the interconnectedness, to lend their skills to the cause, and to help all of humanity rise together. Because, we either go with Mother Earth or we stay behind. And I want to live in this beautiful planet. I want my children to experience the beauty that we still do have and that we can protect.
I feel like, also this analogy, if I can say, this analogy makes it possible for people to have a little bit more patience, because there's an understanding that we are here and that we're trying to get to here. And I think some part of an activist's work is, how do I live in this space?
Yeah.
But also understand that we are here and it's a gradual process.
Yeah. Well, it's hard. I think it's what you're speaking about is hard, though. It's hard. The challenge is that when you have your proximity to that experience is so close. So you have experienced, the repercussions of misogyny and toxic masculinity, right? In the same way that in dealing with the issue of race, my proximity to the issue of race is so close, right? So it's a cultivated kind of, it's a level of patience that you have to cultivate, while at the same time feeling a sense of urgency because of the experience. And I'm sure Xiye too. I'm thinking about the indigenous community. Yeah, exactly. And and also going back to that point, we were talking about the very older people, seeing looking at younger people and saying, you're the next generation, you're going to transform everything. But we have ample examples of older people who are doing incredible work, who have done incredible work. I mean, John Lewis just passed. I mean, John Lewis was working until the day he died. We have all of the members of the indigenous community, the elders who have been out there protesting, land rights, for, clean drinking water, all of that. And across the boards from a variety of different cultures around the world. So we have examples of that, And I'm seeing as you're talking, Xiye, and listening to the way that you're beautifully. There's a beautiful synergy between, the material world and the spiritual world in the way that you approach your activism. And it drew me into reflecting on those 10 points that you have, and you're kind of like a 10-point plan that you put together. And reading through those, I mean, there's this beautiful thread of those two realities. I get the sense of the material world, but also the spiritual world working together in harmony. And I'm wondering if you can talk about, if you want to foreground a few of those points that you talk about in that plan, just to kind of frame that for us, because I think you made some really good points in those in that list that you put together.
Can I humbly suggest that she just work her way down it so that we can get just like bam, bam, bam?
Go for it. Do it. Let's do it.
Okay. Do you have it memorized?
No,
I have your own work memorized. Okay, great.
I did
memorize. That would just be too much. We'd have to switch chairs. She'd have to be conducting the interview.
Yeah, I think I wrote them like 2 years and a half ago. So
wow.
It's been a long time, but they're still so true. That's what I like about them, that they're timeless. So I'll start.
Yeah. And sorry, before you start, it's the 10 tips for a climate justice activist.
Yes.
Okay.
So number 1, do not start from scratch. There are hundreds of existing initiatives that you can join. Number 2, maintain good communication with your peers and the adult organizations that you partner with. Number 3, take good care of yourself and others. Number 4, make your activism intersectional, include all stakeholders in your decision-making, and do not tokenize. Number 5, just for the sake of efficiency, don't do things the patriarchal way, the racist way, the exhausting way, or any way that excludes marginalized voices. Number 6, at events that you hold, invite Indigenous peoples to do land acknowledgements, and remember that Indigenous knowledge is the foundation for addressing the climate crisis. Number 7, always convey that individual and structural change are both indisputably necessary. Number 8, meet people where they're at. Not everybody knows the climate crisis back and forth. Explain and present solutions. Number 9, use accessible language. Not everyone knows ppm, parts per million, or IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And number 10, always talk about greenwashing, environmental racism, green gentrification, and what an equitable transition means.
Wow. Well, I'm going to be drawing on all these points that you shared for a long time to come. Xiye, I just feel so honored that you came and you spent this time with us and shared from your heart's core, your passion for the work that you're doing. By the way, what does your name mean? I've been curious about that. Xiye. What does that mean, by the way? Yeah. What does that mean?
It means soft rain in Otomi. So my Indigenous heritage, Xiye, soft rain.
Soft rain. Wow, it's beautiful. Wow.
Rain.
Well,
Beautiful.
Please continue to rain down with your heart, your knowledge, your wisdom, your activism. And before we leave, I just want to ask you one final question. Okay. It's going to be hard to imagine this, but say I'm an 18-year-old kid. Say I'm it's been a long time since I've been 18 years old, but just say I'm an 18-year-old kid, 15-year-old kid. All right. I'm thinking that I'm realizing that there is a problem with climate change, but I'm not sure if I have the capacity to make a contribution. What would you say to me to activate something within me?
Well, first of all, say that no voice is too small to make a difference. No movement has ever succeeded by thinking that it won't. And we have what it takes to change the world because that's why we're here. And in this life, we will understand what we need to understand, and we will be part of movements that call us. So if you're feeling called, organize your community, how big or small that is. I started with my school. Now I'm an international climate organizer. We all start somewhere, but what's important is where you're coming from and have that vision of where you're going.
All right, sign me up. Sign me up. I'm ready.
And that's all she wrote, folks.
I'm ready. Xiye, thank you so much. It's been such a joy to have you, and you're welcome back.
It's been a pleasure. We're not only cheering you on, we're marching alongside with you.
Absolutely.
That's
thank
what
you.
I like to hear.
That's
it. And for all those out there in podcast land who are joining us, thank you for joining us on Undaunted. And remember, choose to live undaunted.